Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Shane Beamer. Shane, let's start with the obvious question here. I see you've been able to get out on the golf course. That is a beach tan, not a golf course tan. But the important thing that I've been wondering about for a while: how's the foot holding up throughout golf?
Looks good. Uh, Fully recovered. Still a little sore, but foot is good for sure. So been able to get on the golf course a little bit and had a great event last week to raise money for charity with some other head coaches and enjoyed that and enjoying the month of May right now.
I didn't want it to hold you back. That look, we've all had those moments where we thought, "How is this going to impact my golf game?" And that's the type of thing that can definitely come up. But you pulling your weight with Houston Nutt, it looked like you guys did all right though. So that's the positive.
Yeah, no, we did. Loved playing with Coach Nutt. He was inspiring and was a great partner and leader that we needed in that group. And tied for first and got into a playoff and lost in a four-hole sudden death playoff to Mike Norvell and Urban Meyer. So credit those two guys for finding a way to win. But as competitors, it stinks. I mean, Coach, we finished up that day about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think we got done playing 3 o'clock. And that night, probably 8 o'clock, Coach Nutt called me and just said, I'm still sick about that, about us not winning, which I feel the same way. But it was a great event. Got the competitive juices got flowing and a lot of money was raised for charity, which is the most important thing.
Okay, so my terrible transition was going to be I wanted to personally kick a Gatorade cooler the second I heard Pete Thamel talk about Spencer Rattler in the NFL draft. See what I did there? And that's someone. Look, I didn't have perspective of him like you did. Obviously, nobody does. I know that you voiced your frustration on social media, but kind of take me through what that was like on Friday to be able to see these outdated opinions come in, on national television.
Yeah, it was disappointing. I mean, I've been hearing this narrative, if you will, about Spencer Rattler since I was an assistant coach at Oklahoma. And he was a freshman coming into our program that high school coaches back in, what would this have been, 2018, I guess, had an opinion of him because of something they saw on a Netflix show when he was a junior or sophomore in high school, whatnot. Um, and then I saw the Spencer Rattler that in 2019 came in as a freshman, sat behind Jalen Hurts, and was a great teammate. I saw the Spencer Rattler that in 2020 was replacing Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts had been the last three starting quarterbacks for Oklahoma. He comes in and proceeds to, we as a team, but he is our starting quarterback, lose our first two games in the Big 12 that season to Kansas State and Iowa State. And I saw how he handled that. I saw how he handled getting benched that season in the Texas game by Coach Riley. But then Lincoln put him back in the second half. He led us to a 4 overtime win, and then we went on to win the Big 12. So I saw he handled all that. Then the way he handled himself coming in here to Oklahoma, or coming into South Carolina, was voted a captain of our football team twice by his teammates as well. So when I said that, it was frustrating because I had a bunch of NFL teams, call me about him and leading up to the draft, and everything that I said about him was positive. And is he perfect? No, he'll tell you that, and has room to improve as a player. But he's a great teammate, comes from a great family, and it was just disappointing. And Pete Thamel, I don't think he made this up. And I told Pete that, he has a job to do, and if NFL teams were saying that to Pete Thamel, then so be it. But shame on those NFL teams if they felt that way, because they clearly didn't do their research if they did feel that way. And then I'm going to always defend our players, and I didn't like seeing a good kid's name kind of get dragged on national television on Friday night for something that is not him.
I think if we are looking at this objectively, we can all say, well, yeah, players are going to be scrutinized for everything that they do throughout their football careers. But, the thing is, if he had been a nightmare throughout his time in Oklahoma, there's no way that you would have brought him in to South Carolina for your second season there. You're still trying to establish the foundation. If you had just never recruited him to come to South Carolina, I don't think people would have connected the dots a few years later on draft night saying, hey, why didn't one of his former assistants at Oklahoma want him post Oklahoma. If that was the case, fine. Then we can talk. Then we can have that conversation. What's up? But correct me if I'm wrong here. It just felt like the exact opposite. And everything that I observed from you guys firsthand, everything that I had heard out of the program was that people like that guy a lot. And there are things that are said that are just so much different internally than externally.
Absolutely. His teammates liked him. Coaches liked him. He was a great teammate. He comes from a great family. It starts with his mom and dad. His mom and dad are awesome. He's very grounded. If his parents ever called me about anything, honest to God, it was to just thank me for the experience that Spencer was having at South Carolina, not to say, hey, Shane, we've really got some concerns about this or that or this. It was never any of that. And he was awesome. And his teammates obviously feel the same way because he was voted, like I said, a captain twice. And in my conversations with NFL teams, he did nothing but help himself with NFL teams this past season, dealing with some of the adversity that he had to deal with. I mean, he came back for another year in 2022 when he could have left early for the NFL draft after 21. We finished the season beating Clemson and Tennessee, and then he played really well in the bowl game against Notre Dame. He could have come out that year and gotten drafted, and he didn't. He came back, but then he didn't know coming back that he was going to lose an all-conference receiver that would basically never played last season for us. He didn't know that we were going to have 6 season-ending injuries on the offensive line and that we were going to start 2 true freshmen in the SEC for 10 games last season. But he had every reason. The normal guy could easily use that as an excuse, get frustrated, complain, whatever. It was the complete opposite with him, just the way that he handled that and lifted guys up around him. And I know that resonated with NFL teams, and that's what they told me, just the respect that they gained for him in that season and how he handled it. So I'm excited for him. I've had some NFL teams that called me last week just to say, we really liked him, and we were actually trying to trade up for him at times during the draft so we could pick him, but we just couldn't get the deal done and things like that as well. So in the end, he ended up where he was supposed to be. He's going into a great situation with New Orleans, and he'll be a great teammate in New Orleans, just like he was at the University of Oklahoma and just like he was here at South Carolina. And going back to what you said at the beginning too, when he did come here, I mean, obviously I had a lot of friends that were were on that Oklahoma staff because Lincoln hadn't taken the Southern Cal job, and I reached out to all those guys about, hey, Spencer, after he lost his job to Caleb, tell me about it. And it was all positive. It wasn't, he turned into some prick. He was a good teammate and handled it the right way. Was he upset? Sure. He was an undefeated starting quarterback that had just won a conference championship and lost his job in a game that they won. And when they were actually undefeated and ranked number 4 in the country, I think, when he got benched. So I understand he was frustrated, but he handled it the right way and was great here too.
I know there might be some people, if they really want to connect some dots, they might be thinking, hey, the Pete Thamel thing, he's the same guy that after SEC Media Days a couple years ago, he kind of called you out for the whole B-list SEC Network talent comment. But I watched you guys last year have a laugh about it. And I know you guys are good, so I don't want people thinking that was a thing too. But it's one of those things where, I would shoot him a text right after, be like, hey man, what did you not get the full side of the story here? You talk about that communication of having that after the fact. He's not getting up there in line. This is what he's being told. But what does that process look like? How much obligation as a head coach do you feel like you just want to run through a wall for your guy and say, hey, what you just said on national television, that might not have told the entire story of how this played out?
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm always going to defend my guys. And my point, too, was when I was saying the tired, lazy narrative, I mean, in general, it wasn't attacking Pete in my mind. It was this narrative that may just be out there with NFL teams that didn't call me or didn't do their research on a guy, or I don't know who Pete's talking to. Is he talking to a head coach or a general manager? Is he talking to some scouting intern that's trying to break into the profession? I don't know, but just do the research. And again, I know Pete didn't make it up and report a story, but it's also, understanding that there's a lot more to it than that, So he had a job to do, and again, I understand he has a job to do, but if anybody in the NFL felt that way about Spencer, then they didn't do their research in my mind, because people, if they talk to people here in this building, it would have been nothing but positive coming out of there as well. And look, I got, respect for Pete Thamel, and he's done it for a long time and whatnot as well. And that was a narrative that was out there, but it was frankly tired and lazy because it's not accurate. And if you spend any time around Spencer Rattler, you know that.
Okay, so I've talked to you each of the last, I guess this is post year 3. I've talked to you after each of your off seasons. And, I remember thinking last year after I followed you at SEC Media Days, like it's kind of crazy how much the word momentum was brought up. Everybody was talking about, beating Tennessee, beating Clemson. And if I had a shot for every time that word was addressed in one of your interviews, I mean, I would have been blitzed that day. But, you mentioned how that was so important in getting support and being able to get people to kind of buy into the program. It's important on the back end and for what you guys are trying to build, but it didn't guarantee anything. And you kind of saw that play out. Looking back on the season that you guys had, why did 2023 come up short of those expectations? And I guess, why weren't you able to build on that proverbial momentum, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. I'm never a guy that I tell our team all the time, like, we're not going to seek comfort and make excuses and things like that as well. So I don't want to be a hypocrite in saying this, but I knew going into the season that we had a really good team. We had a good group of guys coming back. And anytime you have a NFL quarterback returning like we did in Spencer, and a lot of, key pieces from the 2022 team returning, there should be some momentum going into the next year. I also knew that depth-wise, we weren't quite where we needed to be overall, just from a depth standpoint. And we were kind of in that year last year in a lot of ways, where we had some really good players that Coach Muschamp had left behind, to carry on Joyner and those guys. And then we had some really good young players that had come in that were good, but needed to develop as well. And I knew we had a chance if we could just stay healthy for the most part. We'd be okay from a depth standpoint. But if we had injuries, it was going to be a challenge. And frankly, that's what happened. I mean, we had 12 season-ending injuries last year to key contributors, and whether it be Mo Kaba, our linebacker for us, who tears an ACL covering a kickoff in the first kickoff of the UNC game, or Kason Henry, who's our starting right tackle and gets his leg rolled up on, I think, on the third play of the UNC game, and he's out for the year essentially. We ended up having to start 2 true freshmen on the offensive line, and we started 5 true freshmen overall. So from a health, depth, injury standpoint, that was a big factor, particularly in this league, because it wasn't like games where we were just getting our brains beat out. We had a chance to win every game, going into the fourth quarter. Now, some more so than others. I'm not saying that every game we had going into the fourth quarter was a 1-score game, because it was not, but you felt confident going into the fourth quarter. You had an opportunity to win every game, and we just couldn't get over the hump in a lot of those games. I'm proud of the way that we finished. We won 3 out of 4 down the stretch. We certainly did not play well in our very last regular season game. And I'm not sitting here saying, well, we went 5-7 because of injuries. That was a factor, but there's a lot of stuff that you got to look at, starting it with me as a head coach, that we didn't do a good enough job of. And we didn't do a good enough job running the ball. That's part of the reason we were 5-7. We didn't do a good enough job protecting the quarterback. That's part of the reason we were 5-7. We gave up way too many explosive passes on defense last season. That's part of the reason we were 5-7. We didn't make as many game-changing plays on special teams as we had the year before. Was part of the reason we didn't have the year that we wanted. I didn't coach well enough. It starts with me. So it's one of those things. We weren't good enough. But also, you don't want to sit there and just blow the whole thing up. You realize how close you were in some things as well. If we lose to Florida by, I think, 2 points in October, or we play a little bit better on offense in the last game against Clemson, the narrative's completely different. We find a way to get into a bowl game. We overcame all these injuries. We go to our third straight bowl. Maybe you win the bowl game, you finish with 7 wins, and now there's great momentum going into 2024. We didn't get that done, but I'm also not going to lose sight of we were close to getting over the hump. By no means is it good enough, but it was a great reset for me to take a step back and look at everything that we're doing, continue to build on things that we're doing, but also say, you know what, we now have a 3-year body of work that tells us we're not quite where we need to be in these areas, and it's my job as the head coach to fix that and feel like we've done those things.
What'd you learn about yourself?
Great question. I don't know if how much I learned because we faced adversity in 2021 at times. We faced adversity in 2022 at times. You know, I really just learned about the people around me. I got really good people around me. We continued to battle. I mean, we were sitting there 2-6 at one point, and found a way to respond and win 3 out of 4 down the stretch and get ourselves in position to get in a bowl game. Continued to learn that knew this already, but as the leader, as the head coach, all eyes are on me. And it wasn't easy last year when you have some of the adversity that we face with injuries and youth and tough losses and things like that. It was a very challenging year from that standpoint, but really probably just realizing that every year is truly starting over. And I knew it, and I told our team that all the time. I mean, we had that great finish to 2022, like I talked about, beating Tennessee and Clemson, and then that was in November. And then 6 weeks later, when January comes around to start the 2023 season, that first team meeting that we have in January of 2023, there's like 40 new players in that room, either freshmen, transfers that weren't even here in 2022. So that's a third of your team. We're allowed to have 120 players on our roster. So 1/3 of our football team weren't even here when we beat Tennessee and Clemson. And now we had a lot of returners. We had two-thirds of our team coming back, don't get me wrong, but really just illustrated to me, which I already knew, but even more magnified it. Just you can't just assume anything from year to year. It's truly starting over. And it doesn't matter if these players have heard me give this same speech 3 years in a row. Say it 3 years in a row, because there's a third of the team that hasn't ever heard me say it, and it's still important. So probably learned that more than anything. Just don't assume anything, and we didn't. It's not like I sit here and said, okay, we're going to be good in 23 because we were good in 22. I knew it was starting over, and we tried to be better, but we didn't quite be good enough, and we've had to tweak some things. And excited about kind of where we are going forward now.
I want to talk about LaNorris because he comes in my opinion, one of the most intriguing players in the SEC, and not just because he rocks the rec specs like my favorite athlete of all time, Horace Grant. That's a huge positive for him. But, I know you haven't named a starter yet, but you see what he's capable of in that spring game. What is your evaluation of him, and what is he capable of being in this offense?
Well, first of all, I love the Horace Grant shout out. I was a big Bulls fan growing up myself as well. Him, BJ Armstrong, and all the unheralded Bulls back in the day. LaNorris has been fantastic. I like that quarterback room, LaNorris, and he's in there competing with Robbie Ashford right now, transfer from Auburn. Luke Doty returns for another year in our program, and Davis Bevel's come in. Dante Reno's a freshman. But I think the thing with LaNorris is he's not your typical freshman. He's very poised. Nothing rattles him. He's just steady, and he's kind of one of those guys that the bigger the moment, the calmer he is, which is an awesome quality to have in a quarterback. And he just seems that any time he's gotten in a situation under the lights, so to speak, he's done really well. Whether it be in our spring game, he was very poised and efficient. Last season, he got in and played against Furman and Vanderbilt at the end of games and performed very well. We used him kind of in a wildcat role against Kentucky last year, which was a very big game for us in November at home. He performed well in that. So he's a great young man, very grounded, awesome family, talented, has really worked to become a really good quarterback since he got here. And he's just a winner. So I'm excited about the future with him, excited about Robbie Ashford and what he's brought to our program as he continues to get in there and battle in that room with all the other quarterbacks, LaNorris included, and excited to see kind of how we continue to shape that room, shape the offense this season.
When would you like to have a starter named by?
I think it's important. We met with I met with every quarterback coming out of spring practice, or I met with every player coming out of spring practice, and told all those quarterbacks, LaNorris included, and Robbie, that coming out of spring practice, LaNorris is our starting quarterback coming out of spring practice. But competition is a core value of this program, and now it's LaNorris's job to continue to earn that job and hold on to it. And we'll give Robbie every opportunity to compete. But, competition in our program is ongoing. I mean, we've got two fantastic safeties, and Nick Harbor and DQ Smith, that both were freshman All-Americans. Well, they came in 2022, and the starting safeties were both seniors. And Nick and DQ had both became the starting safeties by game 2 or 3 as well. So the competition every week, the guys that give us the best chance to be successful. I like in the summertime a team kind of being able to rally around one guy in the summertime, and then certainly as you get into 2 weeks out before your first game and all that as well, it's very evident. Here's who your starters are at each position, but understanding though that the competition never stops.
Everyone wants to see Nyck Harbor kind of take that year 2 jump after he got a lot more snaps really latter half of last season. But, I know it's tough to be able to kind of juggle what his role is going to look like when he's got those track duties in the spring. But when Bruce Feldman puts a guy at number 1 on his freaks list before he ever plays a college game, that kind of tells you all you need to know about him. What's the freakiest thing that you've seen him do, perhaps outside of running the 100 in 10-1-6, whatever he just did?
Cool. Great question. Probably just the everything he does to me is freaky. Just the way that he can, his size, his speed. I went and watched him run a track meet in person back in February at an indoor meet, and he's out there doing very, very well. And his head track coach came over to me, and he's like, "Yeah, we're just kind of, he's very rusty and raw right now." And I'm like, "God almighty, rusty and raw." Like, I'd hate to see what not rusty is compared to how good he looked right there running it. And he's like, "We're just going to continue to build him up for outdoor season where he can really take over." So that was like an eye opener to me as well. Watching him run on television when he was a senior in high school, I think it was up in New York City against professional sprinters. They're the best in the world, and he sat in there and held his own when he was a senior in high school, and obviously didn't have the training they did. But I think the thing that stands out about Nicholas is just his genuineness. I mean, he's very appreciative. He's grateful to be here. He's very humble, and he's a big kid in so many ways. I mean, he wanted to. Probably one thing just kind of shows you his mindset and how talented he is. He didn't really do much with us in spring practice because he is full speed ahead on track right now. But he called me the night before the spring game and was adamant that he wanted to play in the spring game. And this was going to be 3 hours after I think he set a personal record for a race in a track meet across campus here in Columbia. So he wanted to run in the race and then come over and play in the spring game that night. And he hadn't really practiced all spring, and I wouldn't let him just because I didn't think that was the best thing for him. Personally, and I wasn't about to get him hurt and cost our track team something. But the thing with him is he easily could have. I mean, because of his speed, we could have put him out there and thrown him a couple deep balls, and he would have wowed people as well as rusty as he might have been from a football standpoint if we had let him play.
I think fans see that speed and they go, "Why can't you just have that guy run go balls? He's faster than anybody on the field." Why is it not that easy to manufacture looks for him? And how much is that an increased priority of being able to try to tap into what he does best to make sure that it's not just a limited route tree and that he's more involved in the offense?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not that simple. I mean, it's Okay, teams are aware of his speed, so now do they play like too deep to that side and put a safety over the top where he's not going to be able to get past that safety? He's a bigger body, so do teams now try and get up in his face on the line of scrimmage and press him, jam him at the line of scrimmage so he can't get off the line? Because when you're a bigger body, there weren't many. When you're a bigger body, that's a challenge. And I can't imagine when he was playing high school ball up in D.C. that there were many DBs that got up in his face and wanted the pressing as well. So those are all things that are things that he needs to work on, becoming a better route runner, working on his releases off the line of scrimmage, catching the ball, getting in and out of breaks, running after the catch. I mean, there's a lot to it, blocking and the perimeter blocking. And he's a tough kid, tough young man for sure. So those are all things that he'll tell you he needs to continue to improve on. Mike Furry, our new wide receivers coach who played in the NFL and coached in the NFL, he's going to do an amazing job with Nyck and already has of helping him continue to develop. But then it's also our job as coaches to help him with that also, because there is no question when he rolls in the game, teams better be aware of him because of his speed. Now, he's a build the speed guy. Some guys, those first 10 yards, they're on you. Other guys are a build the speed and then they outrun you. Nyck's, in my mind, is more of a build the speed guy. That's one thing I've talked to the track coach about is let's get him really like first 10 yards. Let's continue to increase that. It's going to help him in track. It's going to help us in football. So we've got to continue to get him on the field, utilize him. I know he'll continue to work and fine tune all those things, but we tried to do that even in game 1 last year against North Carolina, being able to just get him out there and just throwing deep balls, just the threat of him and attacking people downfield. We need to make defenses feel that whether he's able to get open because of the coverage they're playing or not, they have to respect him being out there.
It's kind of crazy to think about him being in an offense wherein there's another guy with the name Rocket in it. And he's not the Rocket. Seeing Rocket Sanders hit the portal was a reminder of like, hey, nothing's guaranteed. The 2023 season that he had, just really frustrating, I know, from his perspective. But he kind of had his breakout game against you guys a couple years ago. When he hits the portal, how much does that factor into your mindset of like, God, I watched this guy just be incredible a couple of years ago. I need to get him on our side.
No, it does. Not just against us, but what he did after us too. You watch in the SEC, you're getting ready for teams every week, so you're watching other teams' offenses and defenses. So you see Arkansas on tape with whoever we're getting ready to play, Texas A&M, who we play every year, or Missouri, or whoever, and you saw what he was doing. So certainly you're aware of who Rocket Sanders is, even without what he did to us out in Fayetteville back in 2022 as well. And then you go back and you watch his tape where you're really watching him and not just the Arkansas offense or defense. You're going back and you're seeing some of the things he did as a running back at Arkansas, and it's so impressive. Not just running the ball, but catching the ball, pass protection, all that. But then you get around him and you talk to him and you find out about him as a person and see what a great guy he is and what an asset he would be to your program on and off the field. So he went in. It didn't take long. Thankfully, we had some connections with Dow Loggins, our offensive coordinator, who had been in Arkansas, Jameel Smith, who had been in Arkansas as the strength coach and is here now with us. Ryan Juracek, Hunter's son, who was out there and knew Rocket. So he has some connections here also, plus the opportunity for him to get closer to home. He's from Florida. It was a good situation for him, what we were offering, and then it was a great situation for us to be able to get him in here, and he's been awesome.
Last one for you. What does success look like in 2024? And look, I'm going to be honest with you. SEC Media Days, I'm telling you the way that we're going to go about this from a media standpoint. You heard the word momentum thrown around by everybody. You're going to hear bounce back. That's going to be the phrase that's very common. You're going to, by the end of the day, you're just going to be like, oh my God, if somebody says bounce back to me one more time, I'm just going to freak. But what does success look like for South Carolina 2024?
Maximizing the potential of this year's team and getting everything out of it. And frankly, last season, I don't feel like we did, and that's ultimately my responsibility. And even with some of the adversity that we faced, we did not maximize last year's team, and that eats at me and still bothers me. And it's my job to get that fixed and get that right. So to me, it's successful season is maximizing all the ability and the potential on this year's team. We got to maximize it and get the most out of it. It's going to be a challenge again. Obviously, we get to play a tough schedule. Excited about that. And we're going to have to rely on true freshmen in a lot of spots. So we're going to have to get those guys ready to play. One thing going back to last season is we relied on a lot of true freshmen. We ended up starting 5 of them. How can we get them acclimated even quicker to be even more successful earlier in the season than what we did last season as well with some of our preparation? So looking at all those things. But freshmen play well. We got a good group of older guys that are returning, particularly on defense up front. They've got to continue to lead the way. We got to continue to bring these young guys along and stay healthy and get the most out of this team. And if we do, I'm excited about what we can accomplish.
Okay, I lied. Last one for you. My daughter is showing major long snapping potential at 11 months old. She is 97% in height, 93% in weight. This is not a dad asking for a scholarship offer 17 years from now. Okay, this is not that. This is a dad asking someone who is very well versed in that area. In theory, if she could, if she decides to pursue a career in long snapping, it's going to be her choice. But if that door is open one day to be able to get some guidance, just get some pointers here and there, a little tip, little quick FaceTime video, something like that, if that's going to be available down the road with someone like yourself.
Absolutely. Glad to help the future generations of long snappers, and particularly if it leads to potentially coming to the University of South Carolina to do that as well. I'm all for it. And I would just say don't overcomplicate it. It's a similar motion to throwing. It's just you're doing it with 2 hands instead of 1. So don't overcomplicate it and continue to be a great athlete. But it's like if you can do it, though, it's a skill set that not many people can do. So take advantage of it.
That was the entire reason I wanted to have you on today. It was actually just for that. So this was.
I'm glad. Whatever else I can do, let me know.
Shane, I appreciate it, man. We'll do it again soon. Appreciate it.
Always appreciate you.